How's it going, American History 2 students? This is Mr. Bell coming at you with our last video meeting before spring break, because tomorrow is Good Friday and you're going to have the rest of that next week off, and I hope you enjoy this time with your families. Catch up on reading, video games. Just don't go out and interact with people, because we want to beat this coronavirus the best we can. So this would have been day 144 of 180 if it was normal school. It's COVID-19 shutdown day 18, and this is going to be your lesson for Thursday, April 9th, 2020. This is going to be a watch-along for a reading activity flashing back to World War I and kind of what it was like dealing with things such as mustard gas. The reason I'm jumping back to World War I here, I know we just got done with the Depression and all that stuff, and it's time for World War II, it is time for World War II. And I didn't want to start that mega of a unit and then go on spring break for, 11 days or so. I wanted to come back from spring break and start fresh with World War II. So that's why we're going back, and we're going to be doing a brief reading activity on some World War I stuff. But let's go ahead and do our warm-up for today. What was fundamentalism? This was the belief that the Bible was literal and should be taken as such, and it should impact laws. List three main preachers of the fundamentalist era. There was Amy Semple McPherson. She's the first female to ever have a broadcast license as a preacher. I believe she is the first female to ever have a broadcast license, period. There was Father Charles Coughlin. He was the terrible preacher who looked down upon Jews and agreed with Hitler on his views toward Jewish people as an anti-Semite. And then there's Billy Sunday, the best of the bunch. At that time, the most famous former MLB outfielder for the Cubs. He was the first mega preacher of American history. Who was Sinclair Lewis? He was a famous playwright who was known for being the first one to push females toward leading roles on Broadway. So let's review these again. Fundamentalism, the belief that the Bible is literal and should be taken as such legally. The three main preachers of the fundamentalist era: Amy Semple McPherson, Father Charles Coughlin, and Billy Sunday. Sinclair Lewis was a famous playwright who put women at the forefront of his plays. Again, have a good spring break. Let's go ahead and get into this reading activity for today. And I'm going to pull that up right now. This is the Rearguard poem. I will be emailing this to you guys and put it on Canvas. And of course, you'll have access to this YouTube video on YouTube and on Canvas, and I'm going to email that to you as well. Now, I'm not a big poetry guy. You may recognize this part of the reading activity. We did it in class when we were covering World War I right before all the craziness with COVID-19 started. What we didn't do was this last little bit, which was the poem The Rearguard by Siegfried Sassoon. Siegfried Sassoon. Now, I'm not a poetry guy, so you'll have to forgive me as I read it. I can dive into kind of the literal stuff here from a historical perspective that's going on. I'm not going to be able to break down every nook and cranny of a poem like Miss Fleischer or Miss Spearman or somebody, Macready or somebody like that could do, but we're going to do our best. This is meant to kind of be a light lesson, a light reading activity watch along to send you off in the spring break, and we'll come back fresh, hopefully, and start World War II. So, without further ado, The Rearguard by Siegfried Sassoon. Groping along the tunnel step by step, he winked his prying torch with a patching glare, from side to side, and sniffed the unwholesome air. Tins, boxes, bottles, shapes too vague to know a mirror smashed the mattress from a bed. And he exploring 50 feet below the rosy gloom of battle overhead. Tripping, he grabbed the wall, saw someone lie humped to his feet, half hidden by a rug, and stooped to give the sleeper's arm a tug. "I'm looking for headquarters," no reply. "God blast your neck," for days he had had no sleep. "Get up and guide me through this stinking place." Savage, he kicked a soft, unanswering heap, and flashed his beam across the livid face, terribly glaring up, whose eyes yet wore agony dying hard 10 days before, and fingers clutched a blackening wound. Alone he staggered on until he found dawn's ghost that filtered down a shafted stair. To the day's muttering creatures underground, who hear booms of shells in muffled sound. At last, with sweat of horror in his air, he climbed through darkness to the twilight air, unloading hell behind him step by step. So this is a guy who was in the thick of it in World War I. So let's kind of go back through this, and I'm going to annotate it, kind of break it down to the best of my knowledge as far as interpreting poetry to the history that I know. So the rear guard, this is somebody who's coming up last in a wave of soldiers, and it's not necessarily the most prestigious honor. It's not as bad as like a grunt, being sitting in as cannon fodder, but you're not in the prime of the infantry here. Groping along the tunnel step by step, he winked his prying torch with a patching glare from side to side and sniffed the unwholesome air. You got to think the atmosphere he's walking through. No mustard gas here, probably, because otherwise he would be dead. But the stench of war in the trenches and all the things we talked about with World War I. Tins, boxes, bottles, shapes too vague to know. A mirror smashed the mattress from a bed, and he explored 50 feet below the rosy gloom of battle overhead. So it's 50 feet below. That could be referring to a trench. It says a mirror smashed the mattress from a bed. The guy's going without lack of sleep, so perhaps he was sleeping and interrupted in the middle of the night from battle, from breaking glass. This is why I don't do a ton of poetry, but again, lighter lesson here. He's awakened, obviously. Tripping, he grabbed the wall, saw someone lie humped to his feet, half hidden by a rug, and stooped to give the sleeper's arm a tug, so waking up someone in front of him. I'm looking for headquarters, no reply. God blast your neck. Get up and guide me through this stinking place. He's arrived somewhere new. Savage, he kicked a soft, unanswering heap, and flashes beam across the livid face. Terribly glaring up, who eyes yet wore agony, dying hard 10 days before. Looks like he hasn't had much sleep for 10 days when he had seen the height of battle 10 days prior. And fist of fingers clutched a blackening wound. Could that be from the trenches? Could it be the type of rot that we saw with trench foot? Alone he staggered. Now this isn't in a trench to my knowledge. Alone he staggered on until he found dawn's ghost that filtered down a shafted stair. So he had been walking throughout the night. To the day's muttering creatures underground, who hear the boom of shells muffled around, the sounds of warfare, artillery. At last, with sweat of horror in his hair, he climbed through the darkness to the twilight air, unloading hell behind him step by step, fighting through the chaos. So let's look at the questions for rear guard. Rear guard response sheet. You have a total of 6 questions. I'm asking you for this one to pick any 2 questions that you would like to answer. Any 2 questions. And you see some of these are opinion, like predict what happens next to the rear guard. Completely an opinion-based question. So that would be a really easy one to answer. Describe the conditions of the tunnel and trench. Even if you didn't understand the poem or agree with my interpretation, you know what happened in the trenches. So 2 would be an easy one. So I'm not telling you to answer 2 and 5. You can answer any 2 that you would like. But out of these 6, I think 2 and 5 would probably be your easiest route. So that's going to wrap it up for today's reading activity, Watch Along on the Rear Guard. I hope that you have a great and safe spring break. Enjoy time with family, but at the same time, try to be aware of the craziness in the world. Wash your hands, practice social distancing. And when we come back, we'll be going to World War II, which will be extremely interesting to talk about. A lot of notes in the first week back with only 1 activity, and then more reading activities the second week as we talk about World War II, which will be kind of a 2-week proposition. I'm teaching you as much as I can of this content up until the end of the semester. So if we only get to Reagan or Clinton or Vietnam, that's where we get to and we'll stop. But I am going to try to give you as much of this information as we can. Thank you for all your hard work during this crazy time. Wash your hands, stay safe. Happy Spring Break 2020.